with Martial Power Monday. I'm Phil. I design books and illustrate them and publish them on DMsGuild. There's a link down below that shows you a number of the books that I placed on DMsGuild. They're 100% preview. You can look through all of them just to get an idea of the kind of artwork I produce and the kind of ideas that I have. They're all PDFs, so they're always evolving. So there's I update them seasonally as new information comes out that warrants having them updated. So go ahead and check those out. Further, there's a link down below in the Twitter where I just posted that I've gone live. So you are certainly welcome to check that out as well. I'm just going to kick through here real quick and just post some stuff to the different Discords where I hang out at, just to give folks a shout out that it's Martial Power Monday again and that we are live yet again. So Indestructiboy, Designosphere, Fry Mini, Dungeoneers Pack, Trent Monk, Cleric Corner, Zipperon, Classes and Constructs, Fry Minis, Dice Try, the OBS, DMsGuild, yeah, I think that's about all of it. So yeah, I got some stuff. Let us get into the meat of what we are doing today. So I'm going to switch my windows around here real quick so you guys can dive into space with me. Bam, Martial Powers. Here we are. Okay, there's also a link down in the description down below. Hey, Heretico. There's a link in the description down below that also points to my Patreon, where the link to this playtest content is available at no cost. The Patreon link will eventually lead to where this product will also be 100% preview, like the stuff down in the link down below. So you're just getting in through the door a little earlier now. It's got all the progression from level 1 to 20 for barbarians, fighters, monks, rangers, paladins, as well as the invocation options for warlocks and the infusion options for artificers. So as is, you can completely run this and start running 1 to 20 campaigns with your martial and hybrid characters. Hey, Renetico, stopping by to say hi. Hey, great, man. Have at it, dude. We are today looking at magic paradigms and variant character options that are used to help sculpt and shape how you are using these powers. So this is more me talking, I guess, game balance and power resource philosophy than any hard tech this session. But this is a part of I guess what we would classify as DM section. So we'll just label it that way for now and go. And then we can take down this magic paradigms down to dial that down to a 20, and we'll dial this down to a 20, and we'll dial this down to a 20, because this is all DM stuff, right? Okay, so let's just take a look here, front down. So this is the martial progression table. It's designed to allow all multi-classing between barbarians, fighters, monks, paladins, rangers, and rogues to continue the power die progression that you have from level 1 to 20, regardless of which classes you're multi-classing into. It's designed to increase the maximum rank of the maximum amount of mana that you can channel at a single time, up to 5 at 20th level, regardless of how much you multi-class. What multi-class does control is how many powers that you learn. You're basically learning 16 powers out of 20. I've been seriously considering just rethreading that so that it's a total of 20 powers at 20th level. But I'm still nitpicking with that just a little bit. But the idea is that depending on what your level is, of each class depends on how much power you have in each class, or how many powers you can learn per class. Each individual class limits the maximum rank of power you can learn. So even though you might be a 10-10 ranger paladin, And at 20th level, you'd be able to channel up to 5 mana. As a 10th level Ranger Paladin, you'd be able to learn 3rd rank powers either off of the Ranger or the Paladin's list, but you'd have a total of, between the two of them, it looks like 22 powers, maximum of 3rd rank, up to 5 each. So I think I want to rework the total number of powers that you gain per level so that I can have that curve out a little more smoothly between the classes. So that's a small nitpick that I need to work on. The amount of mana that you gain is based on the number of classes that you have. So like a 10th level Ranger, 10th level Paladin would have 20 mana from each of them, which would end up totaling 40. So it really wouldn't matter how many levels of Paladin or Ranger you have out of 20, because it's going to end up being the same amount of mana that you have. So I should probably have the amount of powers that you gain also reflect that. And considering down some of the buy down costs that are built into the game, that's actually not a very bad idea to add in that cushioning. So I think I'll be doing that. Probably something, I don't know, we're looking at 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm pretty comfortable with the amount of powers that you gain through 9th, then maybe 10, 10, 10, 11, 11, 12, 12, 13, 13, 14, 14, 15, 15. That might actually be a way to go. 9, 10. I'm just going to fiddle with that a little bit here real quick. 12, 13, 14, 15. That would still end up with more powers as a 10-10 Paladin Ranger. 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Two, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I could just be cheeky and just do this down the line. 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 19, 19. Does that make sense? Probably not. Jeez, it starts with 2. How do I integrate that? Because if I front load all the multi-class, you're just going to end up with a shitload of stacks. So I'm not necessarily happy about that. Total powers known. I want it to be a minimum of 2. That's the appropriate way to do that. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. $11, $12. How does that break? 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 12. 10. Yeah. That's the break right there. Huh. 19, 20. Does that break anything? One plus 19 is 21. So it should be a total of this should cap at 20. Two, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And now I'm stuck in this little mode of futzing around with the numbers. Forgive me a minute. I'm trying to make this thing curve out. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10. 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 16, 17. 18, 19, 20, 9, 11, 1 is 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That feels appropriate. And then 10, 10. If I continue to back this down to like 11, 11, 12, 12, dot, 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 dot. Thirteen, 13, 14, 14, 15, 15. I want to do that. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 10, 11, 11. Okay, so the thought process here is you know what? I think I'm fighting something that doesn't need to be fought. Max rank, power die, total powers, the amount of powers you know at the listed level. Magic paradigms. We're gonna pull this. Down to the other section. Power gear. DM's magic paradigms. Here's our paradigms. Back up here. Let's see. Channeling, we go through the different classes. All right, spellcasters, artificers, multiclassing and channeling and spellcasting. There we go. Multiclassing between channeling classes. Each character combines their level to determine max power limit, power die. Each separate class level determines the total max power limit, determines the max power limit, power die, and powers known. For example, Monk 5, Ranger 10 has a combined max channel limit of 5 plus 10 equals 15, 4 mana with 4 mana with D8 hit die and knows a total of 15th level. Let's get back up front. Get back, Loretta. $15. 13 powers. Thank you. Each separate class level determines the total. And each class adds their separate mana into a single pool. All classes gain mana on a full rest. Classes that regain mana on a short rest continue to do so. For example, Monk 5, Ranger 10, as a 15th level channeler has a pool of 25 mana, regaining 5 on a short rest. There we go. Multi-classing between channeling and spellcast. Okay, great. That fixed the problem altogether. So if you've got 5 levels of Monk and 5 levels of Fighter, for instance, going back up here. There we go. 5 and 5 is 10. You'd have a total of, a total of 10 powers. And you know what? Honestly, I can go back and I can just go back to how I had this originally. 10, 11, 10, 11, 11, 12, 12, 13, 13, 14, 14, 9, 10, 11, 11, 12, 12, 13, 13, 14, 14, 15, 15, and then 16 at 20th. There you go. Okay, cool. So yeah, regardless of how you stack these things up, these three, I like that. These three things remain continue to scale regardless of your multi-classing, and then these pools scale individually per class. That makes for, I think, really smooth yeah, really smooth multi-classing there. Okay, great. I'm happy with that. Okay, cool. So now that we got that resolved, let's go back into looking at the paradigms. Now that we're back on course for the day. Thanks for going on that lark with me. That was something I was sticking in my craw. I'm really happy. I'm really happy just to make that decision. So that feels good. Paradigm. Oh, that's right. It's before the powers. Just gonna look at that again real quick. Just make sure I can sign off on it. Combines their level to determine max mana channeled. Max channel limit, that's important. And each class adds their separate mana pool. Each class, how to put it? The maximum rank of power you can learn is limited by the level of the class. Each class, yeah, no, that I think this is proper. The maximum rank of power you can learn is limited by the level of your class. For example, a monk 5, ranger 10 can, for example, a 15th level character with 5 levels of monk and 10 levels of ranger can learn up to 3rd rank powers, because ranger gains 3rd rank powers at 9th level. That's probably simple enough to describe. And adds their separate pool to a single pool. Adds their separate mana into a single pool. All classes gain mana on a full rest. Classes that regain. Okay, great. I think that covers all the variables. That's really, really simple. I am thus satisfied with that. So back on actual point. So we're looking at magic paradigms. DM section. Let's see. We're looking at what are we talking about? Okay, so there's let's see. Paradigms are ways of describing how magic and powers exist in a setting. For example, forgotten Forgotten Realms describes magic. The Weave. Characters with spell, with magical. Magical energy from it while using their abilities. Creatures with magic are connected to the weave, pulling magical energy from it while using their abilities. Conversely, in Ravnica, magic is in Ravnica, magic is described as 5 colors, and each magic contrarily, creatures with magic are connected to the weave, pulling magical energies from it while using their abilities. The weave provides no matter what the effect is. Conversely, in Ravnica, magic is described as 5 colors, and all magic. Conversely, in Ravnica, Strixhaven, and Theros, magic world around is drawn from the is the fabric of reality described as 5 colors. White, blue, black, red, and green. All magic, one or more of these colors. Further, elemental magic draws energy from the 4 elements. Air, earth, fire, and water. All magic uses energy from one or more of these elements. Let's see there, and then there we go. So that's our three basics. For example, Forgotten Realms describes magic as the weave. Creatures with magic. Creatures draw energy from the weave. As a universal source. There we go. I think that does well. These are examples of different magic paradigms which can describe how a character is channeling power can describe the energy characters channel while using martial powers, period. But this is not, but there are, let's see. Hey, Tyler. So these are examples of different magic paradigms which can describe the energy characters channel while using martial powers. But it is not the only, these are some examples. These are a few examples of different magic paradigms which can describe the energy character's channel while using martial powers, but other options exist as well. I don't think that's the right way to put that. The channeling martial powers. This is the DM section that we're trying to set up here. We're talking about magic paradigms and other limitations. So how do we do this? How do we actually want to do this? Because I'm just talking about subsections, magic paradigms, and as well as variant character options. Well, actually, let's call this limiting power. That's probably a more appropriate way to express it. But I'm trying to figure out. This is we're making sausage today. We're fleshing out the parts of the DM section, since the player section is essentially done. Other than just further testing and balancing individual features, the front end of the book is essentially done. We still need examples of different character builds. As well as like building magic items and building more creature options, which is further down in the book. The core of the book is done. Now we are going through the process of fleshing out the bits so it feels more like a completed product for someone to really just get what it is that we're trying to do. So right now we're trying to, we're making sausage today. So it's bloody and gross and certainly not very pretty. but that's why we get paid the big bucks, right? Because we do the work that others don't, to provide the things that others don't have. That's not really how that expression goes, but anyway. DM section. So what are we trying to do here? Let's step back a bit and let's be less scholarly and just be a little bit more real. Magic paradigms. Let's see. Spell slots and spell points of as presented in the core rule books are by nature universal. Are by nature what? Generic resources. Are by nature universal resources that can be spent to cast spells, channel powers, and use class features. Let's see. Spell slots and spell points are presented in the core books. As presented in the core rule books, are by nature universal resources. Let's see. Spell slots and spell points are universal resource. It is a universal resource that can be spent to cast spells, channel powers, and use class features. Let's see. Paradigms are primarily Paradigms are narrative tools to describe what that resource is, where it comes from, and how it can be described. There have been many paradigms present. There are it's going to be a little bit more casual just as I hammer that out. There's a lot of examples in such as shadow magic, elemental magic, shadow magic, elemental magic, magic, gathering, uses color magic, a lot of examples of magic paradigms in media, such as elemental magic, of air, earth, fire, water, shadow magic, see. There's let's see, wit, grit, as skill, luck, let's see. Spell slots and spell points are presented in the core rulebook as a universal resource that can be spent to cast spells, channel powers, and use class features. Paradigms are narrative tools to describe what the resource is, where it comes from, and how it can be narrated is a better way of putting that, and how it can be narrated as part of the character using magic. There's a lot of examples of magic paradigms in media, such as elemental magic of earth, fire, water. Magic the Gathering uses 5 color magic, uses 5 colors. Uses the 5 colors: white, blue, black, red, green. Magic can be divided in two, such as light and shadow magic. Magic can be divided between skill, luck, and force of will. Let's see. How am I putting this? Oops, wrong button. I bumped the thing. There we go. Now I'm fixing all the things. Don't mind me, just fixing all the things. There we go. Okay. Let's see. Paradigms. Okay, so when using spell slots, when using universal source with spell slots or points. When using universal sources with spell slots or points, a character can choose one or more paradigms to narrate the effects of using fair enough. When using universal source with spell slots or points, a character can choose one or more paradigms to narrate the effects of magic they're using. Such as using earth magic to create a barrier, or fire magic to shadow magic to create areas of darkness, or white magic to increase, to temporarily increase your armor class, your AC in a battle, etc. If the resource, since the resource itself is, universal, mechanics, is only a narrative element, is only a narrative. The description of the magic only provides role-playing details about the character or creature using the magic. For example, a demon isn't likely to use the power of friendship to imprison the souls of its victims. Isn't likely to use the power of friendship to imprison the souls of its victims. But a monk, but a cleric of light may use the power of friendship to describe how their cleric spells may describe the effects of spells they cast. That's kind of ridiculous, but there it is. Let's see. I'm just kind of rambling here. I don't feel like I'm getting to the heart of it. So we're talking here. Magic paradigms. Okay, I want to get even more. I want to get even more basic. Paradigms are both narrative elements, are both narrative flavoring as well as a game mechanic, as well as a paradigms are primarily narrative, but can also be. Am I still live? Yeah. But can also be paradigms are primarily narrative flavor to a character's abilities, but can also act as a mechanic, as a game mechanic that affects a character's mana pool. If Hey, what up? Yo, 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 man. Hey, I'm trying to. I'm exploring the idea today of magic paradigms as both a narrative tool and a mechanical consideration, similar to the 4-element monk that I put out on DMsGuild, as well as the 5-color mana mechanics that I put on DMsGuild. Of course, there's links down below in the description to view all those books, 100% free preview, cover to cover, so you can see what it is that I'm doing. But what I'm trying to bolt out here is we're looking at the difference between the narrative flavoring of different types of magic versus the mechanics that go into limiting what options you have available while using a magic paradigm. As it's designed, magic is universal and generic. You spend a spell slot, you cast a spell. It doesn't matter what the spell is. It doesn't matter what school of magic comes from. It doesn't matter if it's divine magic or arcane magic or psionics, whatever. It's all just a generic spell slot, or of course I'm a spell point enthusiast, so like it's just a pool of mana. And as written, monk key is just key. A shadow monk uses key. A monk of the 4 elements uses key. A sun soul uses key. But with magic paradigms, if you're just taking an individual character, you can give that character any magic paradigm that you want. A sun soul could be using the power of their soul itself as a fire that burns in their heart, as radiant energy that they then channel into monk effects. A Boros character from the Ravnica setting could be channeling white and red magic to create fire, like Sacred Flame or Smite effects, because they're using that Boros magic, that white and red magical energy to create the effects. A necromancer could be using necrotic power or energy or black energy or like necrotic energy from the plane of negative energy to fuel, say, raise dead, obviously. But if they're just a necromancer, they could be using dark energy as like detect magic, like they are forcing secrets to be revealed about the world around them by drawing that necrotic energy from the negative plane to them. And this is just narrative. It's just flavor. Like Cleric Corner is amazing at describing flavor of like how would you express this character in game. So, Instruct Boy's saying, hey, I actually need to give you a peek at the idea for a half caster because I think your mana system could be a real inspiration for it. Sure, happy to look at it, of course. So when I'm building game systems, like 5-color mana is obviously something I've dived really deep into, but I also have one book and probably more to come on the 4 elements specifically for Magic. And these are still, if you're just using generic mana, key, spell slots, as I've been saying, this is just a way to describe how your character is using magic. And if you're just going with a generic 5e game, like any other game, it doesn't really matter if you're describing all of your powers as being fueled by the power of friendship. Like, what does that actually mean in your game? And mechanically, it doesn't mean anything. It's just the narrative flavor that you're giving to the effects. Like my magic missiles, if I'm using the power of friendship, my magic missiles might be blown kisses that land on my enemy, and the force damage can be described as wearing down the hate and suffering in their heart. so that when they reach 0 hit points, they get to return to God's embrace, for example, as opposed to a necromancer using magic missiles is shooting darts of dark energy that are peeling off pieces of its victim's soul, and when they hit 0 hit points, their soul is destroyed and sent to oblivion. So the result is it's still D4 plus 1 force damage when it hits. It doesn't really matter. But if you are going to use a magic paradigm as with mechanical weight inside your game, that becomes a conversation between your DM and your table at session 0 about what kind of magic paradigms are we going to have inside the game. Yeah, so the palette swapping is an underrated point. This is really important for character creation. Yeah, thanks. So when you're building a game, so that's the problem. That's the problem when you're building a character facing product like this, and you're having an open end about how the power systems work. Like when I build this, like I'll flip to and again the link to this, the Patreon link in my description will take you to my Patreon page, and it's just it's a forum post about, hey, I'm building martial powers. Click here to follow the link to see the content. So all the playtest content that we're looking at here is free to view. It's read only, so you'll be able to look at it and you'll see the changes. But you're welcome to flip through here. So flipping through here, let's see. I've got all the. We go to the front again. For those that aren't versed in this, and this is the first time you've looked at this. This is the martial power playtest content. It's designed for barbarians, fighters, monks, paladins, rangers, and rogues to have a unifying alternate magic system that isn't casting. It's not the VSM. I grab an item, I say the code word, and I twist the Rubik's Cube left, right, turn, and that triggers the gate to hell to open. Like, that's VSM examples. Martial power doesn't do that. Martial power is it's not, you're not studying or being granted divine power to manipulate these objects and say these words to make these effects happen. Martial powers are, I'm attacking somebody and I am dumping my will into the attack, and as a result of that, as part of the attack roll, I blow X amount of mana, and it boosts the effect to like have an increased attack, or I ignore cover, or I can hit you further away, or I extend my reach for an attack of opportunity, or I hit you successfully. And now I guess I could scroll down here as I'm talking about this, like the different types of power. There's 5 disciplines of power. There's like exploits, like I'm going to make an investigation check, and I'm going to dump 2 mana into it, so I get to add a bonus to my investigation check. I just hit you with a sword, so I'm going to dump mana into a strike effect. So when I hit you, like Smite, I deal extra damage and cause these extra effects to happen to you. I'm going to maintain concentration, and while maintaining concentration, I can increase my armor class, or I can run faster, or I can walk through walls. Or I gain regeneration. These are different disciplines of power that they aren't like, I'm going to take my turn and cast this spell and this effect happens, and that effect is going to give me regeneration, then I can carry on. Like, casters would be able to point at somebody and say, you over there, you gain regeneration because I did this thing to you. These are all personal things. I'm doing this thing to myself. I'm going to change what I am as an act of will, which is sometimes a standard action, sometimes is a bonus action, sometimes it's just an instant effect that's part of the die roll. So these just as general, like as a reaction, like there's a stack of reaction powers, and again, you can look at all of these by just clicking through on the link. But like here's a stack of reactions that I can take. Where's my stack of reactions? Strikes. Yeah, here's some reactions. Overstep. As a reaction to a creature moving while within 30 feet of you, they must succeed at a wisdom save or move their remaining move distance in the direction of your choice if they succeed, or instead only move 5 feet in the direction of your choice. I may or may not end up keeping that one, but that is an example of a reaction to what somebody else is doing. Lightning reflex is a reaction to failing a dexterity or an intelligence saving throw. I can re-roll and take the better result. That would cost me two mana to do that. And I have, like, say a fighter or like a 15th level ranger has 30 mana. So you'd be able to do like 15 times in a day, for instance. But there's a crap load of them. Like interpose, like a lot of these things are things that you'd see in Battle Master, Arcane Archer, Rune, the Rune Knight, all the different class features from all the different martial powers, as well as a bunch of feats, as well as stuff from the Book of Nine Swords from 3rd edition, Martial Powers 2 and Martial Powers 3 from 4th edition, as well as some Pathfinder stuff. I've curated a list of about 130 some odd different powers that are either modifying a die roll as a reaction, as an attack, as a strike, or something that I can sustain. That's where this accumulated list came from. And so it's being curated and picked down, and we're currently 17th level in my home table, and we've been playtesting this since 10th. So that's running really well, and I know Lauren, one of my Descent into Avernus vehicle playtesters, his team is using martial powers as well. So I'm getting input and a lot of feedback that about what works, what's overtuned, what needs to go, what's too simple, what's too redundant in comparison to other things. But a lot of these are pretty solid. Some of them I get to trim out eventually, and then in extensions later on, like if I wanted to build House Demir, for instance, I could create a whole bunch of Demir blue-black energy sort of ideas. Like as a reaction, I can steal your thoughts. Like that would be a cool Demir only power that I could place. That's like for 3 mana, your rogue could steal people's thoughts, and like as a mix of detect thoughts and sneak it and like sleight of hand pickpocketing. For instance, you can pick up thoughts off of people, kind of like an encode thought sort of cantrip idea with more punch. So when hard on reactions for this thing, yeah, there's a lot of different types of reactions, and some of them, and there's a lot of subsets of what different reactions are. So if you're creating a paradigm, since they have all these different powers, if you keep your paradigm as just flavorful narrative, it doesn't really matter. You could just switch, other than character consistency, you could switch from, say, all my magic comes from the power of friendship, and you could instead switch it over to I am an edgelord and all my power comes from the dark loneliness of oblivion. So all my stuff is like darkness, necrotic, and sorrow driven, and that's how I will flavor all my spells from now on. But if it's just flavor, if you go through that narrative shift in your character, you can reflect that by changing how your magic works. Going back to actually building paradigms as a mechanic, then in your session 0 or when you're setting up your game, it becomes a conversation between the table and the DM. What kind of a campaign are we playing, and what do we want to have inside of our game? Like, for example, if you're playing a Ravnica campaign and you're all MTG enthusiasts, then it may be intuitive for you to say, we are going to use color magic in this campaign. And if you want to have like Gruul elements, each element is represented by a color inside of MTG. Like tables that play Ravnica generally are or Theros or Strixhaven. Those are generally tables that are MTG enthusiasts that know and love the color mana paradigm, that when you play a Witherbloom, they're automatically assuming that's going to be black and green energy, or a mix of black and green energy, or maybe colorless if they're dealing with artifacts and stuff. Like that could be an assumption that your table is making. But what if instead you guys are playing an Avatar: The Last Airbender campaign, and you've got, like, say, a sorcerer, a warlock, and a monk, and the monk decides to go 5 elements. You could set up your game in your conversation that there is only one avatar, so whenever you pick a paradigm, you're going to pick which element you want your character to be devoted to. So the Warlock could be, well, I want to go with Fey Pact, and let's say I'm going to go Fire. So all of your Fey are going to be fire elemental creatures and fire and like fire sprites and stuff like that. And all the spells that you're using are going to be expressed as fire or creating light or having a heat element to it. It's going to be fire themed. Whether it's actual fire or not is up to you. While another character like the sorcerer could be a waterbender tribe. So all the magic that you're using with sorcery is going to have a water theme to it. And you could go so far as to like reflavoring your spells. So like you're not dealing a fireball with fire damage because I'm a waterbender. I'm instead dealing cold damage or bludgeoning damage or force damage because that's more in tune with what water damage might be, as opposed to I can't catch things on fire with water, so that doesn't make sense. But now you're starting to blur the lines between my narrative and the mechanics. If you are going to narrate that we're playing an avatar campaign, your monk of the 4 elements, you could say, well, if there's only one avatar, well, I would like my monk to be that avatar so I can dip into all 4 of these elements. Or you could be, well, you're only an earthbender as a monk of the 4 elements, so you're only going to use earth-based disciplines out of your subclass. And since the 4 elemental monk by as written only has basically 4 powers, and there's at least 4 powers of all 4 elements, so you can pull that off. But you could also like say like anyone can be the avatar, everyone is the avatar, so you can have any blend of elements that you want. Just narrate what it is, because that's what we're doing here. But to go back to what we were talking about is, if you're going to have that you're only one element and you want to play a sorcerer, and your sorcerer has this stack of different effects in the game that are no longer valid as fire because you're introducing this paradigm that you want people to narrate, you're running into a clash between what am I trying to describe and what do the mechanics actually let me do, right? So give me a hot second to catch up. In terms of actual design, rather than having to reflavor it, how do you feel about there being no option to really play a fire wizard without limiting in some way? Would you have preferred if they went with a more elemental focused direction in terms of actual design rather than having to reflavor it? Right, so that's getting into the mechanics of it, right? So let's go, let's just go to DMsGuild real quick because it's on there for free for you guys to look at. Let's look at revised color magic spell list. So this is something that I have on the DMsGuild. It's pay what you want, but like all my stuff, it's 100% free preview. So even whether you grab it or not, up to you. But the whole thing is here. This breaks down all the spells. The free product is all the spells in the PH. If you want the full spell list of all spells ever, then you can buy the Core Mechanics book or any of the other books. But you can see here that we took 5 colors of magic, and in MTG it's white, blue, black, red, and green. And we've broken down each spell into each of their paradigms. So to address the question about a fire wizard only casting fire magic, but so many of these spells have absolutely nothing to do, like for example, blur. Blur makes you hazy. Why? What does that have to do with fire at all? Narratively, you can say, well, once fire gets so hot, it actually makes the air wavery, and it can make it difficult to find where your target is actually at in on the battlefield. Like that's a way you can narrate that, but blur, it just provides disadvantage, like it gives you disadvantage to attack the blurred target. So that doesn't really matter narratively. Mechanically, it doesn't really matter with the flavor of a fire wizard. But so the reason I pulled this document up is because it's the quickest source of being able to look at what are the damage types that are inside the D&D game, and how do they break down, in this example, between the 5 colors, right? So we're looking at, say, acid is black and green energy. Cold is white, blue, and green energy. Fire is red energy, specifically. Force is white, blue, and red. And this is all going off of MTG cards. But your question was about fire specifically. So The reason I'm looking at this is just because it's a visual reference that you can use real quick. So we're looking at how are the colors broken up into their different paradigms. Like white generally is things like divinity, healing, light, protection, restraint, while blue is like air, illusion, mind, suppression, water. Red is aggression, earth, emotion, energy, impulse. These are different ways to describe the flavor of each color. And each element is attached to these different ideas of colors. So if you were to go into a paradigm of fire, the way that we do it here is that if you have, say, let me go into this again here real quick, because I think this is probably the easiest way to demonstrate it. Go into the bundle that I have, and then we'll go look at the Elemental Keybook. And then we'll pull open the Elemental Keybook, just because it's a good example of how this stuff operates. Like here's all the Elemental Key stuff that we built out to 50 some odd options. You can see over here that we have the blue, red, and green from the color mana paradigm, but we also have Elemental Key, which is air, earth, fire, and water. So when we go in, we can define each of these things. Like Control Flames is obviously fire. Elemental Attunement is all the elements, because you attune to elements. That makes sense. Magic Stone being earth, that makes sense. Produce flame, fire, sure. But on top of that, if using this as an example, when you're using fire key, the damage that you're going to do is fire. So if you're going to cast, say, a Cone of Cold, if you're using fire element to use a Cone of Cold, you would instead do fire damage instead of cold damage. It can be that simple. If you feel that you need to recalibrate things because of what type of damage versus effectiveness versus ineffectiveness in the game, that's a completely different conversation, which I will have with you real quick here, which is basically when you're having this session 0 and you're playing an avatar game and you know that you have a bunch of characters, you've got 2 firebenders, a waterbender, and an airbender, and none of them are earthbenders, then you know they're not going to be able to access any earth stuff. For example, thunder is earth damage. When you're building out your earthbender campaign, you will then go through this power paradigm to decide how many, just to fetch it up here again, just to reiterate here, we've got how many sources of damage you have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Plus you've got bludgeon, piercing, slashing, and unarmed. So you technically have 12 types of damage in the game, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There's if unarmed damage is going to be one of these, there's 13 types of damage in the game overall. So when you build out your paradigm, you can choose what type of damage each paradigm is related to. If you're going to have a fire character, you may decide that fire, force, lightning, and radiant damage, for example, are the 4 types of damage that goes with fire. So you would then either, if a spell comes, like fireball is obviously fire, but if you're using fire mana to cast fire spells, you could allow that character to choose between fire, force, lightning, and radiant damage. Those are the 4 damage types that are automatically available to your fire wizard whenever he casts a spell that deals damage. As opposed to a waterbender, when they use a spell that causes damage, that could be cold, say, cold, force, acid, because acid is generally wet, so you can go with acid, and say poison. That might be the other one. Those may be the 4 elements that you go with for water. So you can decide what damage types go with each element that you're using if you're doing an airbender campaign, an avatar campaign. And then when you have that conversation with your DM and your DM knows that they don't have any earthbenders in their party, that means that they're not going to have access to things like thunder damage or maybe like thunder, force, Psychic and Bludgeon might be like the 4 types of damage that Earthbending does. And if you don't have an Earthbender and you have enemies that are resistant to everything but bludgeoning damage, like bludgeoning is their weakness, then you know that you're either going to need to have somebody with a hammer, a bare fist, or earth magic to be able to deal full damage to them, and everyone else will be at disadvantage. A general good rule in a session 0 is the DM should be looking at what characters are able to do and then put enemies against them that are going to either be easier because they have access to spells and abilities that will destroy them, versus this is going to be a tougher fight because you don't have anything that can access and destroy them. So that session 0 and building out those paradigms, if you're just bringing a character into a game and you're just narratively flavoring your character, this is what they can do, the mechanics don't really change. It's just how it is. But again, that breakdown between I am playing a fire wizard and I want to cast Hold Person. How does that get represented as fire? Well, since Hold Person doesn't actually do any damage, it's pure narrative, so it's up to you. But once you start dealing damage in the game or having actual mechanical effects that are clashing with the narrative that you're dealing with, then it comes down to the DM, the player, to have a conversation about, are we actually changing what kind of damage and effects this has because of the type of character that I have? We should define that, what it is up front, so that there's a mesh, so that the gears continue to mesh smoothly throughout the course of the campaign. And then the DM just introduces enemies that either complement or contradict what choices the players have made, which is always the case in a campaign. You should be paying, as a DM, you should be paying attention to what the characters can do so that you can decide, is this a deadly encounter or is this an easy encounter? So it's adding mechanics to the paradigm is more work, which is why Wizards doesn't do it. So if you're going to be like, Wizards' philosophy is keep as much of the game narrative as possible so they don't have to worry about any mechanical clashing of the mechanics that are being introduced because of a certain narrative that you're going with, which is why there's the absence of color inside of the D&D game. It's because that is a lot of work. It's taken me 3 years to be able to accumulate this amount of work about just color, and I'm only just now starting to introduce the 4 elements as a magical paradigm. There's a ton of mechanics that go into it, and you want to be consistent with it, fair, and have a set system so that everyone can benefit from it equally. So that's kind of a tangent. How long did it take you to? Yeah, I think the first book I published was in 2018, and we're almost 2023 now. So I first published, and then the core mechanics came out, and universal spell points came out, and then I put out the spell point warlocks. And then I put out the 4 elements of key last year, along with the revised spell list. So it's been accumulating over the past 4 years, and this will probably publish in April 2023. So that'll be my 5th year of evolving this stuff, and there's still more to do. There's no end to how deep you can go into Magic paradigms. The thing is that you want to build a system that is going to limit your options. So like with an element, like I've avoided working on the 4 elements as a universal system for all classes to buy into, because it's more mechanically complicated to, like, for example, what element should Raise Dead be? It could be fire because of the spark of life. It could be water because the blood must flow. It could be earth because we are physical creatures. It could be air because of the breath that they hold, or it could be all of them. You could decide that it's available to all of those elements. So breaking down how many elements versus, like in this example, for example, we're showing here that like Eldritch Blast, it's a force spell. So it's got white, blue, and red because force is accessible to white, blue, and red. But you could create a character that is channeling black magic, and it's very appropriate for a warlock to use black energy. So in that instance, we have a number of caveats inside of the game. It's like, if this is the type of Patreon you're taking, all of these spell effects that you automatically get are going to be coded to black, because they're granted by that patron. So that black red energy patron is granting you powers that, even though it doesn't have black listed here because your patron itself is narrated as black and red, all the powers you gain from them can also be narrated as black and red, even though the power may strictly be white. So it's really like the farther into a paradigm you go, the more caveats that get created for how those things work, which is why I limit it as like 5-color mana only. Like, here's all the shit that goes into having a 5-color magic paradigm instead of a universal spell point or universal spell slots. Which is why I began the 4 elements with the monk, because the monk in D&D is the only class that has a character built in to all 4 of those elements together. But from that, we can then extract fire priests, water priests, earth wizards, air sorcerers. It just takes a lot. It'll take 100 some odd pages just to build out the 4 elements as its own paradigm. What I am seeing as a result of these efforts is that that's a very limited market that's interested in actual mechanics that reinforce the narrative. Some people really geek out over those mechanics. Like, if I have a black spell and a red spell, the mechanical side of the paradigm is, if I've got 2 color, like let's say I use fire and earth, I'm a magma priest. So that means, like in Dark Sun, I'm a magma cleric. So that means I have access to both fire and earth magic that I can blend into magma. So what kind of damage is magma? Generally, it's fire damage. You could define a magma source of magic, but when you're dealing out damage, it's going to be, say, either force, acid, necrotic, or fire. And the acid and necrotic is being flavored as literally just burning you into ash. It's consuming all the water and life that's in that thing as the magma consumes it. That could be a narrative way of expressing that. When you have a paradigm that has mechanics, you can go a step further into how you're dividing up the mechanics of this. If, like, say you've got a 10th level ranger who has 20 mana per long rest, and he is a magma ranger, you could have some of your things are powered by fire, some of your things are powered by earth, and some things are powered by magma itself. So that's like 2 different flavors of magic, fire and earth, and you blend them together to make magma. So magma could be either requires both fire and earth, or fire or earth. Like, since magma is a component of either of those, either one of those magics would work. So when you're building out your kit of powers, you can define some of them as fire, some of them as earth, and then the rest of them as magma, which could use either fire or earth. So you're playing with not just one. It's like if you were to be like, let's say Wizards of the Coast, when they built multi-classing for spellcasters, they said you gain spell slots from your cleric class and you gain spell slots from your wizard class, and they don't blend. So at 3rd level as a cleric, you've got 3 first level spell slots and a 2nd level spell slot. And then as a 5th level wizard, you've got 4 first level spell slots, 2 2nd level spell slots, and a 3rd level spell slot. And you can memorize spells for each of those pools, and they don't cross. That's actually how 2nd edition and 1st edition worked, that they kept the piles separated. So here's your arcane stuff, here's your cleric stuff, and they don't cross. And 3rd edition plus, they start blending the pools so that your cumulative level gave you the maximum spell that you could cast, and then you have to pick between cleric and wizard how many of those spells that you have each to feed into your pile of slots. And then in 5th edition, they further disintegrated that. Here's your stack of mana or spell slots, and you can learn all these cleric spells, and you can learn all these wizard spells. So like you've got like 7 wizard spells and 8 cleric spells, and you can use any of those 15 spells with the stack of spell slots any way that you want. What Power Paradigm does is it steps back into an earlier edition where you are determining how much mana of each source that you have, because this is a mechanical limitation that you are honestly, that you're choosing to impose on yourself as a character. I want to depict my magma cleric as having fire and earth magic. So I have this selection of spells that are fire, and I have this selection of spells that are earth. And when I run out of fire mana, I can't cast fire spells anymore. I can only cast earth and magma spells because I only have earth mana left over. Narratively, the game only requires you just to have a stack of mana, and you can spend them on whatever you want. And if you want to limit yourself to magma spells because you've chosen to be a magma cleric, you can either take the full list of spells and figure out how are you going to narrate each one of those as magma, or you can choose to just find spells that make sense to you as being magma-esque. And because that's what I'm narrating, I'm choosing to limit myself to that selection of spells, which is kind of where like specialty lists for subclasses come from. This is the flavor of character that I'm going with. So these are spells that I gain, and Wizard's philosophy is you're going to gain extra spells to further flavor that Battlesmith option that you took, or that Twilight Cleric option that you took. Here's Twilight Cleric sounding spells, but still just universal generic key or magic that you're using to cast those spells, but we're giving you extra spells because that's the flavor that you have. If you're going to use mechanical paradigms, you're instead saying, well, there's a lot of different types of spells out there. Some of them are darkness, some of them are light. Maybe some of them, like you could have light and dark magic where you're splitting all the spells into light magic, into dark magic, and some of them might be both. So you would then be saying, as a Twilight Cleric, I am specifically choosing only spells that are darkness in both, but not light-based spells. I don't have access to light spells because I'm a Twilight Cleric. I'm dealing with dim and darkness. So you are narratively limiting yourself as a player to choose from those spells, even though the entire book is still available to you as a cleric. Magic Paradigm takes it a step further, saying if you really want to deep dive into this, we can then break down spells into being light, dark, or twilight. And you would have access to only light and dark spells. You could also have a Twilight Cleric that specifically only has twilight and light. Like I am working the light side of the twilight. I want to build light into darkness, as opposed to I want to build darker into the twilight. I want to take the world into darkness. You would then define these spell slots, or this amount of mana is going to be darkness. This amount of mana is going to be light. And this amount of mana, these spells could use either light or dark. When I run out of light magic, I'm out of light. I can't cast those spells anymore. I can continue using dark magic. And then when I take a short rest, I can recalibrate all the mana. So I can have all darkness, I can switch it all to light, or I can blend it all. You can swap it back and forth as you want, but it's a self-imposed limitation, which is why it's so far back in the book. We describe how powers work. We describe each of the classes, how each of the classes uses those powers as unique subclasses, or like in the case of paladins and rangers, they already have a bunch of subclasses, and we just look at how each of them then use these martial powers that we have here, but it's all assumed to be just generic universal spell points, just like Key out of the player's handbook. It's designed to be generic, but I'm the color guy. So after we describe how all the classes work, we describe how all the powers work, we describe how magic items work, we describe how multi-classing works, we describe how martial powers blends with spellcasting classes. After all that, we can then go, hey, if you want to hamstring yourself and limit your scope of power for narrative reasons, let's talk about power paradigms. So that's what we're getting into. The core, that's what I've been trying to get into. So that's what we've been playing at. Like I said, we're making sausage here, so there's a lot that goes into it. So the idea here is once you choose what paradigm you're using in your game, you can then further define, is it just going to be purely narrative, or is it going to have an impact on the actual game? And depending, because like types of damage matter. Fire is far more common in the game. A lot more stuff is immune to fire. Very few things are immune to psychic or force damage, for instance. So that is a really powerful source. But if your DM is paying attention to the game and everyone is using force damage, then a DM can just customize stuff that's resistant to force damage when he wants to have a challenging fight. But you have to have that up. You have to have that conversation up front. How deep of a dive are we going to take into the mechanics of this, and how much the mechanics need to weigh in on how you're playing your character? Like I'm playing in a game right now where I have a 5th level battlesmith character that uses only red and black mana because he's in the cult of Rakdos. But no one else in the game is using magic paradigms. I alone am using magic paradigms, and limiting myself to only black and red spells and the Rakdos spell list for black and red spells is proving to be one hell of a challenge for me in the game, because no one else has to use it. I'm the only one that's being hamstrung by it, which is fun to me because artifices are really fucking powerful. So me actually hamstringing myself to like, how can I manipulate my character so that black and red mana is all I need to use, and how can I aid my characters to do that? And they're learning what I have access to. They're learning what kind of a character I play. So the group is slowly molding. We're all like any other campaign that runs long term. You mold the group to work around each other to become a cohesive combat unit to complement each other. So when you recognize what limitations your character has, like an open hand monk brings a lot different options to the table than a drunken master brings to the table, for example. Or a paladin brings a lot different options to the table than a rogue does, obviously. You just naturally build your team to work with the advantages and disadvantages, the options that are present or absent from your team. And Paradigms further dives into that. Like, I only got black and red magic, so I'm only going to be using black and red spells. So, like, how like, for example, let's go look at Cure Light Wounds, for example. Cure Wounds is a white and green spell. How would I, as a red and black mana source character, get access to that spell? Well, I spend an extra spell learning Cure Wounds as a red spell. It's normally white and green, and if I spent one prepared spell slot, I could learn it and I could cast white and green magic on it. But because my character doesn't have white or green magic, only red and black magic, I then spend an extra slot to learn it twice. Once basic, and then the second using whatever color I want. And the colors I want are black and red. So I'm intentionally hamstringing myself to have limited access so that when I learn spells, I can spend more on the spells that I'm learning to get the same list that I want under the conditions that I want. And when you're dealing with an OP, like the Twilight Cleric, everyone pretty much recognizes as OP, dropping a magic paradigm onto the Twilight Cleric is a fun way to keep it in your game without it overshadowing other characters. Like, you get all this cool stuff, but here's your list of Twilight spells. And if you don't have, if it's not on that list, you can't cast it. Well, I want to learn this spell, it's not on that list. Well, you'll have to learn it twice. Prepare it and then prepare it again so that you can access to it. Like, that's the most basic way to narrate a paradigm when you want to learn something that doesn't fit into it. Yeah, that's some of the basics. So let me make sure I'm caught up on comments, and I'm just going to keep building on this. Hopefully this is fun stuff. Hopefully this is interesting material for folks to be listening to, because I'm really trying to, there's a lot of, since this thing is built with generic key, like a monk would or whatever, or like I don't know, anything. It's just generic. You can use all this stuff, and when we play test stuff, we use generic key. Even though in my campaign, things are narrated with color. We use the description of magic, because color magic is really descriptive. Like, that guy's just gleaming with white and red energy. You have a general idea that this guy is heavy on protection, warding, prevention, as well as just raw aggression and damage. Like, that's what white and red generally brings to the table if you're familiar with MTG. So when they're running across an opponent that's just bristling with white and red energy just radiating off of them, they have a good idea right out of the box. What is this guy probably going to bring to the table? So you can... Like, you can't, there's no real narrative about, oh, this guy's just dripping with abjuration magic. Like maybe you'd have bubbles and like shells of radiant energy that is like distorting the space between you and him as like some sort of a shielding effect. But I can do that too, but I can describe it as blue. So you're like, oh, that's blue magic. That's probably not physical protection, but it probably means he has some sort of magical wards. Like if I want to pop him with a magic spell, I might end up having to spend extra spell slots just to target him because he has blue wards on him, as opposed to black wards. If I target that guy with a spell, I might be taking damage for doing that, unless I spend extra mana to protect myself from it, for instance. Or that white warded character, if I want to target him with a spell, I may be required to make a concentration check just to do it. Otherwise, my spell sizzles. Like you can set up flavor like that to inform your campaign, and after 4 years of playing the Color Magic campaign at Eberron, we're now at 17th level. The characters the players have a really good idea of this creature that they're encountering is bristling with black and red magic. They're like, is he possessed? What's his origin from? Like the paladin's like, I want to detect evil. Yeah, he's got evil all over him. Or they're surprised if he's bristling with black magic, but he has no evil. They're like, what's this guy's story? That becomes interesting to them because the narrative flavor is contradicting the mechanical language that they're getting off of, like, say, the detect evil spell. So, sorry, I was catching up. I've been struggling with elemental identity in this game as well for a past year. Would you be willing to sit down and talk about this further? This is in topic. This is a topic normally. Yeah, absolutely. You can either, if you know where I'm at on Discord, drop me a line. If you don't know where I'm at on Discord, catch me on Twitter and then drop me a DM there. And if you hate Twitter, then if you click on my channel, there's a Gmail that goes to Phil Kearney Creations. So you can just drop me a line there and say, hey, and I'll have a conversation with you, no problem. But yeah, paradigms are deep and interesting. But like, if this stuff is making your head spin because there's so many variables, that's the problem with paradigms. That's why Wizards doesn't pursue it. They're like, if we open the door on color magic, we're going to have to build an entirely separate role-playing game that deals only with Magic the Gathering, like Planeswalker RPG or something. Notice that it's been out on the Guild for like 3 or 4 years now. Yeah, it's been out. Ravnica's been out on the Guild for 4 years now, and there's never been a single peep from Wizards about color magic in D&D, because this is the amount of depth that you have to go into to make the paradigm work. These are all Electrum bestsellers, damn near gold, which I'm really happy about. Me getting gold in, like, say 5 years for these products, I'm pretty happy with that. It basically means that I've been getting sales on these things. Basically, somebody's buying something about it once a week. But I mean, as an independent third-party publisher, I'm pretty happy about that. That basically tells me that when people stumble into it, they're looking for it and it's good enough for them to buy it. So that also means that for every one person that buys it, there's probably 10 people that grabbed it for free and either just are like 12-year-olds who really can't afford anything anyway. So why burden them with trying to find it pirated when I can just give it, like I say on my streams a lot. When I was 12, back in the 80s and 90s, back in the like 1980s. Yeah, it was 1987 when I was 12 years old at the mall, B. Dalton and Walden Books. I would go to the mall with my sister. She's like, "Stay out of my way." It's like, great, don't bother me. Come pick me up when the mall closes at B. Dalton. I will go into B. Dalton. I will grab the Dungeoneer Survival Guide from 2nd edition. I will go back in the corner and I will read that book cover to cover. The managers knew who I was. All of the staff that worked there knew who I was. And at the end of the month, when I got my lawn mowing money, I would go in and I would buy that book. And then I would come back and I start going through the next book. And I would go through each book. I ended up buying Spelljammer, Planescape, all the 1st edition books like Oriental Adventures, the Wilderness Survival Guide, Dungeoneer's Survival Guide, Deities and Demigods, all the monster manuals, Dark Sun, like all those books I bought from B. Dalton and Walden Books at that mall because their manager was cool with me hanging out, chewing through the books, learning them as a young gamer. So I wanted to pay that back to the community by making all my books 100% free, because there's a shitload of kids that can't afford these books but are like, what am I supposed to do? Like, well, just read the books and figure this shit out. So get into it. but that's just my personal philosophy. I know that every time, like I know that the numbers are basically for the spell point warlock that I put out there, which is pay what you want. It's got basically I will there'll be 3 downloads before I get a sale, and a lot of times those sales come with a bundle because people will download it, they'll read it, they'll come back and buy it, and then they'll come back and buy more stuff, because every time you buy one of my books, it's a discount code to another book, and it is stack up, so you end up getting like 30% discount off my stuff. But I don't care how long it takes for you guys to thumb through my work to get to it. It's what you ought to do. But the point is that the stuff is mechanically complicated. I think it's a big ask to get people to pay up front for something they're not even sure how well it works. You should really be offering stuff for people to play. I mean, personally, if you're exploring really deep mechanical changes in the game, you should give people an opportunity to futz around with it before they decide it's something that they love. Maybe they'll come back and buy it. Those that honestly use it and can afford to generally do, because people are honest. But if you can't afford it, you should play with it anyway, because I'll be here in 20 years when you can afford it, and my stuff will be better then. Anyway. Right on, dude. Glad to hear, Hernetica. Hernetica, I love it when you're around, because you're always just cracking out stuff. Oh my God, it's 2:20. How long have I been live on this stream? Hour and 35 minutes. I'm gonna have to sign off soon. Yeah, okay. So we were trying to work on magic paradigms today. Let's see if I can get some stuff down here, because I'm gonna have to come back and play with this. So there's narrative, where it's only flavor. Mechanics, where each source has its own pool, and you juggle how much of each source you want to power each discipline. There's 5 there in the power paradigm here. There's 5 disciplines. There's scrolling up. Yeah, there's 5 different paradigms. There are exploits, there's maneuvers, there's reactions, there's strikes, and there's sustained powers. There's 5 paradigms. So in this system, if you're just going with universal mana, just spell points, you pick however many of each one that you want, and if you have a point, you spend the point, you do the thing, just like you would expect from everything else in the player's handbook. If you are going to use there are single power paradigms equal universal spell points, such as the weave, or prana, or magic, or just magic. There's dual power paradigms, such as light versus dark, good versus evil. Equal power paradigms equals, let's say, complementary versus contradictory. Contradictory include light versus dark, good versus evil, law versus chaos. Complementary include, let's say, body and soul. Let's see. Let's see. Talent and knowledge. What's another good complementary? let's see. Love and friendship. Just as off-the-cuff examples. And then you've got Trinity, power, paradigms, equal, like body, mind, and body, mind, heart, skill, luck, and talent. What's another good paradigm? Light, dusk, darkness. If you can think of another complementary, contradictory, or trinity, go ahead and drop a signal. That'd be great. You got quadratic, power paradigms, quadratic, power paradigms equals 4 elements of air, earth, fire, water, or law, chaos, good, and evil. If you can think of another paradigm, certainly let me know. But I think those are probably the 4 biggies. And then quadratic, power, equals 5 color of white, blue, black, red, green. Let's see. Narrative is flavor only. Mechanic. Equals devoting into each aspect of the paradigm. And so let's see, dividing the pool. So through extensive experimentation, there's 2 ways you can go about dividing the paradigm. It's like, for example, if you mechanically, so dividing powers and pools, dividing powers and pools into each aspect of the paradigm. For example, an elemental paradigm can define, can separate, can divide the powers, can divide. For example, an elemental paradigm can divide the disciplines into separate aspects, such as strikes are fire, exploits are earth, etc. And depending on which element you want your character to embody, determines which element determines which discipline you can access. That's not the best way to do it. That means that, like, if we go back up here, like if you define reactions as fire, then, and if you're a fire cleric or if you're a fire character, then the only powers you're going to be allowed to use are reaction powers. Like that's bad design, and so I don't recommend doing it that way. What I actually recommend that you do is each character chooses what aspect of their paradigm that they want, and then they have a selection of how many paradigms they can are native to that element for them. Like if you are like strike powers, for instance, a water bender and a fire bender can both have access to strike powers, but the fire bender again is defining strikes as fire magic, as opposed to the water bender is defining strike powers as water magic. The effects are going to end up being the same. It's just the damage type will be different depending on which paradigm it is that they use. So when we go through this, we'll need to go through the same process of breaking out each of the damage types into, here we have their respective colors. We already have elemental types in the keybook that we did, so that's already pre-built for us that we can just drop in here as pre-built coding. But then we also get to build out things like light and shadow as just general suggestions. But I don't need a deep dive in each of these, because the way that the power system is built is that they are just generic by nature. And whenever you choose these powers, you're going with, I want to be a firebender, so I get to choose 2 of these 5 disciplines to automatically be fire magic based. So when I pick up a strike power, it's automatically going to be fire. And when I pick up a maneuver, that is also automatically going to be fire. But the other 3 disciplines are not fire. So I have to pay for it twice to get access to, like, say, if I, let's say exploits aren't native to fire, but I want to gain charge as an exploit. When you move 10 feet towards an enemy, this movement doesn't provoke an attack of opportunity and can roll 1 power die per mana channeled, adding the highest result to the first attack targeting that enemy. Like, that might not be part of your native fire list, but if you want to pick up that power, you're going to spend 1 to learn it and then another for it to gain access to the fire paradigm. That is a way for you to limit access. And the reason I'm talking about limiting powers is because these powers are a lot more versatile and don't have things like components, verbal, somatic, material components. They don't have the same targeting parameters. They're a lot more loose, on the fly, instant effects that you can use. They are more powerful. So limiting your paradigms so that if I want to use, like, I've got 5 disciplines, and I can use, if I'm limiting myself to only 1 aspect of a paradigm, then I may have 2, maybe 3, depending on how you set up. Again, it's another caveat. There are no hard rules in this paradigm system other than just generic mana. Everything else is flavor. But if you want to dive into a deeper level of mechanics, that's why we have the DM section, power paradigms, diving into more specifics. I am out of time, which means, yep, I'm out of time, so I gotta log out. I'm gonna be on at probably 7:30 this evening PST. That's 10:30 Eastern time. I'll be on for a few hours working on the Eberron book cover. That is damn near done. We're gonna finish up the character art and just start polishing at that point, and I'll just be talking about random stuff later on tonight. We're here every lunch stream on Monday for martial powers. I'm going to see if we can build this out to be a little bit more structured so it's easier to wrap your head around, because there are so many different ways you can take paradigms, and it's all voluntary. These are all voluntary restrictions on your character. Like for example, if you're using a rogue with powers, you may decide in the campaign that rogues have free access to exploit, to, like, say, exploits to modify skill dice, reactions because rogues get to drop on people, and strikes because rogues can exchange sneak attack dice for smite powers. So that might be something that like those 3 powers are native, but if they want to get access to maneuvers and sustained powers, those are not native to the rogue. So the rogue has to spend 2 lessons for each sustained power that they learn. So it's more difficult for a rogue to learn maneuvers and sustained powers, but it's easy for them to learn exploits and strikes and reactions. For instance, while say a paladin would be native and easy for them to, like, say, learn strikes, maneuvers, and sustained powers, while exploits and reactions are difficult for them to learn. So they have to spend 2 lessons to learn each reaction and 2 lessons for each exploit, but it's easy for them to just pick up strike powers, maneuvers, and sustained powers. So I think it might be easier for us next session to come back in and build out ideas about what limits of disciplines you'll have for each class, and then maybe back in the conversation into paradigms, because class limitations is actually a lot easier to create limitations on than it would be for paradigms, which are incredibly complicated issues. Like, all the books I've done so far, I've only dealt with 1 paradigm at a time because they're so complicated, except for the elemental book. And that then goes into the 4 elements, and as well as color magic, but color magic only defines elemental stuff as either white, blue, or red. Blue, red, and green are the 3 colors that are native to elemental magic and Magic the Gathering. So the elemental keybook is primarily for elements, but it also cheats into the magic system by limiting your color palette to blue, red, and green. See how complicated that gets super fast, which again is why Wizards doesn't do it, because it's super easy just to say, I'm Rakdos, I use black and red magic whenever I cast Friends or Goodberry. I'm going to use black and red magic to cast Goodberry. And it's like, why does that make sense? Well, according to MTG, it doesn't. But according to Wizards of the Coast D&D, the black and the red, that doesn't make sense. It's like they're not encouraging you to use black and red magic. They're just encouraging you to call yourself Rakdos, and you happen to be able to cast Goodberry. But there's no mechanical sensibility to it. It's just the narrative. So mechanics are a lot more complicated than narrative. That's why Wizards of the Coast books can be so thin, because there's so little mechanical depth to them, which is why older generations are complaining so hard about how thin the mechanics are in Wizards of the books, because they're used to more mechanical complicated. They're paying for that mechanical complication. They think they're paying for that mechanical complication. Show me how these mechanics can express these ideas to me. And the answer is either there are no mechanics expressing these, it's just flavor, or, as I'm demonstrating, the mechanics are so deep that you're basically having to rebuild the game from the ground up. Like, I had to rebuild all the spell casting, all the combat, and all the adventure tiller sections of the player's handbook and the DMG to make color magic work in the color magic books that I have printed on the guild right now. Doing so the same for elemental magic requires the same depth, but all the language just changes from magic language to elemental language. And there has to be a discussion about, like Bifey is asking, how do you go into the mechanical crunch of expressing all 572 spells? How do you make all of those fit inside of one of the 4 elements? The answer is it's incredibly complicated, and you have to make some serious hard decisions that is going to alienate some of your potential audience, which is a great reason why it should only be narrative and flavor, which is why Wizards has done that, because you want your product, a monetization philosophy is you want your product to be as accessible and open to as many people as want to use it, so you aren't alienating your audience by saying, Resurrection is earth magic only. So you water priests out there are SOL. And a lot of people are going to say, whoa, 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 wait a second, I can see magic working that way. And then you just say, well, then do it that way. Well, if that's what you're going to say, what was the point of you placing hard mechanics and listing out each spell anyway? You have to bake into the game system caveats that are internally consistent with the narrative that you're creating, which is why there's so much content that is devoted to it in these books. So, but hopefully I've cracked open the conversation and muddled the waters enough to make it interesting for folks to want to come back and explore this space with me more next week, because that is exactly what we're going to do next week. I am recognizing here that the folly of the presentation here was that Magic Paradigms is not the primary source of limiting power. The actual start of the conversation is limiting power, and how do you limit power? See, I'm learning too. We're all learning together. So we're talking about limiting power, and then we're talking about native. Let's call it disciplines. Let's go with native disciplines per class. Using native disciplines, each class has a selection of disciplines among the 5 that are easy for the class to learn, and others that are more difficult. We have barbarian, fighter, monk, paladin, ranger, rogue, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, artificer, and warlock. So when we come back, class, native disciplines, foreign disciplines. This language may change, but we can then go through. Next week we'll come through and we'll have a conversation about how many, there's 5 disciplines, right? So 5 disciplines of power: exploits, maneuvers, reactions, strikes, sustained. So we can then come back and we can have a conversation about how many disciplines of those 5 should each class have native, and thus how many of the other disciplines are foreign. We already know that a native discipline requires 1 prep to learn, while foreign disciplines require 2. And we know from the start of the conversation when we were futzing around mechanics that a character, regardless of which class they choose, a character will have up to 16 powers that they know. If all the powers that they learn are native, then they're going to know 16 powers. If all the powers they choose are foreign, then they're only going to have 8. And they could have any mix from anywhere from 8 to 16, depending if they're foreign or native. And then we also have, for folks that have been watching this stream already know, that we've been adding meta power feats, or channeling feats, that allow you to modify the cost of these powers. So you could potentially you could potentially spend 4 of your 16 lessons learning very powerful disciplines to become very cheap, to downcast them, to make them very affordable for you to cast. So that is another aspect, a variable that goes into building powers. So we're going to met out all this stuff over time. Next week, we're going to reapproach this backwards and then get into limiting power. I think this is going to be a more logical progression. We'll be limiting power by having native disciplines per class, and then we'll explore, instead of having each paradigm, each discipline be devoted to a specific class, we can allow each class access to all disciplines, but they have to choose 2 or more paradigms, 2 or more aspects of a paradigm, and then each discipline is either native or foreign to the aspect that they choose. So fire magic could be native to strikes, exploits, and maneuvers like we were talking about, or it can be specific to the character, which is my character uses fire magic, and for my character, strikes, reactions, and exploits are native to fire, while maneuvers and sustained aren't. Those are foreign to fire. So for me to learn them as fire, I will have to learn them twice to gain access and then to shape them into fire magic, if that makes sense. So there's a shitload of variables that can go into paradigms, and I'm trying to, this book is designed to let you use any of them, which is the first time I've built a book that lets you use any paradigm you can possibly imagine, like the power of friendship, for example, we cited earlier. What would be native to the power of friendship? Are strikes native to the power of friendship? Probably not. Sustained and reactions probably are, while maneuvers, strikes, and exploits are probably foreign to the friendship, the power of friendship. But you could then buy them into being friendship by having to learn them with more effort by spending 2 prepared slots instead of just 1 each. So that's the thought process that goes on behind that. I'm going to cut stream here. So do me a favor, like, subscribe, log in some hours, because I need to get to my 4,000 hours of content, and each one of my streams is anywhere from 1 to 4 hours a piece. So just load up 4 or 5 of them and just let them roll around in the background, because this is the kind of crap that I talk about in my different streams, whether it's artwork, game mechanic design, layouts, artwork, the font building, whatever it is, aspect of building books. We're doing it all here. We're doing it for the martial powers. We're currently doing artwork for the Spelljammer combat and exploration mechanics, which has a good 40 sessions into it. The Crystals of Mabar adventure that I've been designing in Eberron for 8th level with Andy Healy and Stuart Braz, that is up to its 50th session. Tonight will be the 51st session of map building, artwork, and game design. Whew, we're just gonna keep rolling through. Every book that I build, I'm just gonna come up here and stream it. So this is what I do. So if this stuff is interesting to you, please like and subscribe, share, follow, check out my books, buy some if you like them, blah. But I gotta go. I'll be back in probably about 5 hours, and so I'll catch you guys then.